Hello, everyone. This is Parrish Alford with the Daily Journal. I'm joined by Logan Lowery, our Mississippi State beat writer, and this is Double Coverage, a production of the Daily Journal. We're glad you've chosen to click in with us today. Be sure to check out the Memo, our news podcast, all things Northeast Mississippi. That's coming to you every Wednesday and Friday. And look for a prep rally for all your high school sports needs. That's every Wednesday. And Logan and I are here with you each week for double coverage, usually on a Thursday, maybe a Friday, give and take, depends on what's going on. And there has been a lot going on since the end of football season between coaching searches and NCAA letters and sanctions and things of that nature. But it's been finals week at Ole Miss right now, and it's been pretty quiet. Logan, quiet's not a bad thing. How are you?
Yeah, it's becoming quiet on my end as well. As quiet as things can be this time of year, especially with a new coaching staff kind of taking shape a little bit here at State. But it's finals week here. Today was actually the last day of finals, and State will disperse for I guess, well, most of the student will disperse for Christmas. And Mississippi State's actually going to get bowl practice cranked up on Friday, and be busy with that and some basketball games between now and the end of the year. But yeah, so far, and I talked. Mississippi State had their bowl announcements. They've made a coaching hire, assistant coaching hire. That's kind of been it as far as this week. I had a couple of press conferences with Ben Howland and Vic Schaefer earlier today to get ready for the weekend basketball games. So far, it's been nice to do something. I actually came up to Tupelo yesterday and got some Christmas shopping done and spent a whole lot of money. So you're welcome, Tupelo economy.
Well, thank you very much, Logan, driving the local economy. We appreciate that. Is that Academy Sports open? It's open in Starkville now, isn't it?
It is. I have yet to step foot in there, though, so I haven't. I couldn't tell you how good it is or not.
Well, that's a good place for a lot of shopping. Speaking of shopping, Logan, talking about the Mississippi State coaching staff, where are they on putting that thing together? What has Joe Moorhead accomplished so far?
Well, he's hired a running backs coach. He did that almost immediately after taking the job. He brought in Charles Huff from Penn State and brought him down. And Huff is known as one of the I think he's either the third or fourth best recruiter in the country, according to 24/7 Sports. And he's been out on the road recruiting with Joe Moorhead, trying to shore up the commitments that they do have, and then go ahead and finalize a few of the spots that they still have remaining. But he brought in them, and then he brought in another guy that he was very familiar with. He was actually Fordham's head coach. He actually took over Fordham's job when Joe Moorhead left to go to Penn State 2 years ago, and that's Andrew Briner. And Andrew Briner is going to come in and be Mississippi State's quarterbacks coach and passing game coordinator, running backs coach, assistant head coach, and running game coordinator. So, but Joe Moorhead made it apparent in his introductory press conference that he's going to be the guy calling plays, much like Dan Mullen did at Mississippi State. He's going to have a run game coordinator. He's going to have a passing game coordinator, and I'm sure those guys will have some input as far as game planning and stuff like that. But Joe Moorhead's going to be the guy calling the plays out there, and that's really all the hires that he's made. The defensive side of the ball, still looking for a defensive coordinator on that side of the ball with Todd Grantham going on to Florida. But right now it's kind of a weird situation at State because interim head coach at Mississippi State, and he's also Mississippi State's running backs coach, and that's the same position that Charles Huff coaches. So obviously it looks like Greg Knox is probably going to move on. There's rumors that he's already accepted a position at Florida with Dan Mullen. Greg Knox said the other day on Sunday that he has had entered into no agreement with you, and his sole focus is coaching this Mississippi State. And the same thing with Brett Elliott. Brett Elliott's still Mississippi State's quarterbacks coach, but at the same time, Mississippi State just hired a quarterbacks coach. So a lot of shakeup and a lot of probably some uncomfortable moments, when you got guys that are still here coaching Mississippi State through a bowl game, but their positions have already been filled by the new head coach who's not coaching in this bowl game. So it's I'm kind of curious to see how things shake out, because those new coaches are actually going to be out at bowl practice weeks, kind of just evaluating. They're actually not going to do any coaching, but they're going to be evaluating while the current staff is actually still out there.
Well, I know that the staffs from Ole Miss and Mississippi State both have been very visible here of late. Both were in Tupelo High School earlier this week. You could see the pictures circulating on social media there, and they've been in other high schools as well. Tupelo has 2 commitments right now, Logan, to Ole Miss in the class of 19, 2 juniors looking ahead here, and wide receiver Jordan Jernigan and safety Tay Standifer, who projects as a linebacker. And talking with those guys a little bit earlier this week, what I heard from them was that that they liked Ole Miss, felt like it was the place they needed to be because of the way they were bonding with the coaching staff. They felt like they were really building relationships with these Ole Miss coaches. Matt Luke, of course, being one. He's been around, but their position coaches as well. Jacob Peeler, the wide receivers coach, and Bradley Dale Pivoto, the linebackers coach. And, that's kind of a thing. I mean, that's something that is a strength for Matt Luke when he gets to the recruiting trail. That's something that he hopes will be beneficial there. You look at what he did this season as interim coach in building relationships with those Ole Miss players and bonding and the support he had from them to become the permanent coach. There was the Twitter campaign by these players after the Egg Bowl. So that's going to be something that I think you're going to see from this staff. We always heard from Hugh Freeze, family, love, play for your teammate, and all those things. But there just seems to be a different sense of relationship building with Ole Miss now and the Mississippi recruits. It's going to be interesting to see exactly how that strategy changes. I think it will a little bit. I mean, you always want to put yourself in position for 4- and 5-star talent out of state and other areas of the country if you can. You don't want to spend too much time evaluating and chasing guys like that if you don't have a chance in those races. So you've got to be smart and evaluate and pick and choose your resources and how you use them carefully. But Luke said when he was hired that he wanted to recruit Mississippi from the inside out. I think you're going to see a little bit of a different recruiting strategy there. And Logan, this is something that's come to mind with me. I know you've mentioned this assistant who's come over from Penn State and the national respect he has as a recruiter. What's it going to be like for that staff coming to Mississippi right now, where it may or may not have the relationships, obviously doesn't have the relationships at the beginning that it did around Pennsylvania and in that part of the country? What type of transition does that staff need to make quickly in recruiting in Mississippi?
Well, the good news with that is Mississippi State already has most of its class already get together, and most of those guys are from the state of Mississippi. They racked up a lot of those, and even have some ahead for the 2019 class. They've already got the #1 player in their state locked up for the 2019 class as well. But that's another thing that Joe Moorhead said in his introductory press conference was he's going to recruit Mississippi first, and then kind of spread out in a radius outside of that, and then recruit nationally was kind of the third thing that he talked about. But you're right, though. They don't have a footprint in the South. They don't have a connection. This is an area that the 3 coaches that are new haven't recruited this area, if at all. So they're going to have to build some relationships. And you can kind of see that those relationships are building quickly, especially with the guys that Mississippi State currently have committed. Joe Moorhead's reached out to those guys first and kind of reaffirmed those commitments that they already had. I was kind of surprised to see that there were only 2 losses. When Dan Mullen left to go to Florida, when you have the coaching transition, you see there as far as recruits, some guys, may have felt comfortable with that staff, and they lost one guy for the 2018 class. He was a safety out of Atlanta, Tyrese Ross. They lost him, and then they lost their quarterback commitment for 2019, who was from Baltimore. Didn't lose anybody locally through that regard, and they were able to reaffirm most of those commitments. I guess we'll kind of see over the next coming weeks, how many of those guys sign in December, how many of those guys are going to wait till February to kind of fill things out. But so far, Mississippi State has done a really good job in state staff, and the new staff has kind of come in and reaffirms a lot of those commitments.
Logan, one thing that I've heard from people since these two new coaches have come in place, Matt Luke at Ole Miss and Joe Moorhead at Mississippi State. We talked about the Egg Bowl and how it's been written by some that that's one of the more toxic rivalries in the country right now, with changes at the head coach position at both schools. Do you think that changes any? With Hugh Freeze moving on, Matt Luke in the driver's seat there, Dan Mullen is gone. What do you think? Does this rivalry become less toxic?
I don't know. I guess the jury's still out on that. I mean, I don't know how much Joe Moorhead, if he's going to do like Dan Mullen coming in and Dan Mullen kind of poked that rivalry with a stick and just kind of rekindled everything. And I think he was kind of the spearhead of a lot of that. I think he really got the emotions back in that rivalry, and it kind of needed it time back then. I mean, it really, you had Sylvester Croom and Ed Ogeron, and were pretty pitiful back in those days, and really didn't have a whole lot to play for other than that game. And Dan Mullen gets here, and both teams kind of became on the map, on the national map, and the Egg Bowl started to actually mean more than just who got that trophy. I mean, it was a bowl game. It really had some stakes to that game, and we'll kind of have to see how it does moving forward. With all the NCAA talk and the trash talking between the two, each, with the Leo Lewis and the Kobe Jones and that kind of stuff. It's kind of really interesting to see how this thing moves forward.
Well, I'll tell you what, I think one of the biggest things that has kind of made the rivalry what it is of late has been the fact that the NCAA granted limited immunity to those MSU players. Time will pass and everybody will get over that, but that's just what it is right now. But it's going to take a while to move past that. I think it was an uncomfortable, situation for Ole Miss fans at the Egg Bowl. I heard different stories, and you hear those stories all the time, but it was a little bit different feel knowing that the NCAA news was coming down, and knowing that the NCAA had chosen to grant limited immunity to a couple of MSU players there. Regardless of what was said or not said, or this testimony or that testimony, that was just a questionable move by the NCAA. There are other players who were recruited by Ole Miss at other schools that they could have interviewed and things like that. It's difficult when you start mixing in with the in-state rival like that. I think that these schools will get over that. I think that you'll see more sportsmanship on the field in the future. But it's going to be interesting to see, what approach the two head coaches take to this rivalry, Logan, because nobody dictates tone in this rivalry more than the two head coaches. And like you said, I think Joe Moorhead is still TBA, and we'll see what he becomes in the position there. Matt Luke, I think, is going to be a guy that, I described Matt Luke because I've had the benefit now of covering him for an interim season. You get to see a little bit more there. When I compare him to Hugh Freeze would show up every Monday, Logan, every Monday press conference, and it's like there was an agenda. There were talking points. There were things that he wanted to communicate and that he wanted to get across in his time before the cameras on that Monday. Matt Luke would show up every Monday, and it's like, how fast can I get to practice? Matt Luke was not interested in doing anything more than being polite and respectful and answering questions and then getting out of there and going to work as Ole Miss head coach in other aspects, not dealing with the media. And I think that Matt will carry that over to his approach to the Egg Bowl. I think he wants to win it because it's important in Mississippi, and and he's a Mississippi guy and all those reasons. But I don't get from Matt Luke that he is one who will be an antagonist in the rivalry. I think he'll focus all of that emotion inward and see if he can motivate his guys and win the game. And so we'll just see where it goes from here.
Yeah, and I'm kind of curious to figure out, how things are going to be with Joe Moorhead, their approaches, and you can get from those guys on a day-to-day basis. And the jury's still in the same room with Joe Moorhead one time, and that was last week. So still getting to know him. I do know that he has a background as so that's just an encouraging thing, that he's been on my side of things, and he knows where I'm coming from a work perspective. So we'll kind of have to see how that work relationship goes with the head coach and sports writers, with him being on both sides of that coin.
Yeah, you think he's going to talk about injuries?
Dan Mullen said he wouldn't talk about injuries, and he talked about injuries an awful lot. So you didn't know what you're going to get from week to week there. Either you could ask him, and he would you shut you down, or he would just. So you just ask what you were going to get.
That's why you always ask. Shifting gears a little bit, Logan, I've seen a lot of things through the years covering college football, but I have never seen another Power 5 team's plane come in and land at the Oxford Airport for the purpose of recruiting Ole Miss players who, granted, were going to transfer, and that was kind of, part of it. And, I don't think it was anything illegal. It certainly looked odd, but that's what happened with this week with Jim Harbaugh and Michigan landing in the Michigan plane. He took some players out to looks like IHOP over there based on a picture from Deontay Anderson, and expected to visit Michigan this weekend are Shea Patterson and wide receiver Van Jefferson and Deontay Anderson. So those guys we're visiting with Jim Harbaugh this week. We'll see how that goes. But right now, every day there's a different rumor with this Ole Miss player or that Ole Miss player. And frankly, I think that stuff's going to hit another level at the end of this week when finals are over and these kids scatter. They leave campus, they leave Oxford, they get back to hometowns. People get in their ear a little bit. And, so I think there's going to be a second layer of the transfer story for Ole Miss. And, we've seen reports where maybe a dozen or so, 11 or 12, might be looking to transfer. It doesn't mean that all of them will. And when you see some of the names that are rumored to be leaving, Logan, you look and see guys who were disgruntled with playing time or maybe wanted a larger role or things like that. Shea Patterson obviously being the most concerning point there. But even Patterson's departure is made a little easier by the success that Jordan Ta'amu had when he replaced Patterson as the Ole Miss quarterback for the last 5 games. Obviously, Van Jefferson will be a concern. He caught 42 balls this year. Not really surprising, though. I can see Jefferson is wanting a larger role in the offense, and he's just not going to get that on the same team with A.J. Brown and D.K. Metcalf. Jefferson was the second leading receiver with 42 catches, but there were others right with him. And what was interesting there is aside from Jefferson, who had 2 touchdown catches, you had A.J. Brown, DeMarcus Lodge, and D.K. Metcalf, who combined for 19 touchdown catches. So I think that Jefferson would like a larger role in the offense, and he probably will find that wherever he goes. But it's not, it's wrong right now to look at all these transfers and say, well, this guy didn't do this or this guy didn't do that, and it's not going to hurt. It's going to hurt because Ole Miss is going to lose a lot of depth. And while the NCAA did not tack on a lot of additional scholarship cuts, keeping that number at 13, when you start taking guys away from the program, underclassmen transfers, you're taking away a lot of depth. And it's going to be hard to replace that depth. So this is an evolving story for Ole Miss. I think the rumors will hit another pitch when they get off campus. But all this is going to play out pretty soon because these guys will want to be in place, will have to be in place wherever they're going, by the time the spring semester starts in January. So this too shall pass, and it'll be one step closer to a little bit of closure for Ole Miss. Logan, let's talk a little bit of basketball, man. It's getting into basketball season right now. The Bulldogs haven't lost yet. The Rebels have lost 3 close games, 2 of them in overtime, but it doesn't really matter, how you lose the games. If you lose them, that's going to be a problem for your resume come tournament time. Tell us about the Bulldogs.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, Mississippi State's actually undefeated in both men and women's basketball, and I think they're one of only 3 teams in the country that can say that at this point in the season. So not that surprising in women's basketball. Mississippi State had a lot coming back there, but in men's basketball, that's quite a surprise. They were down for so many years over the last. I mean, they hadn't been in the postseason since 2012. So this team is kind of up and coming right now. A lot of sophomores in their second year pretty well. Tyson Carter, the last few games, Tyson Carter, he's the SEC men's player of the week this week, and Tyson Carter scored 35 points the other night, and he's really come in last year. He was just more known as a shooter, 3-point line, put it in. He had that big. He had some three. He's had a few games, but it's really been him driving to the basket that's really made a difference in his game. And he's a little bit bigger. He's still got a long way to go. He's still very, very lean and kind of long and lean. But he's put on a little bit of muscle, and he's attacking a little bit more physical, really high level. And they've just got different guys. It's kind of been a different guy, different night for Mississippi State. They're not just relying on Quindarius Spoon to go out and do it. Witherspoon, his younger brother Nick, they've been a really good combo for them. Abdullah Dew's had some really good games. He's been a difference maker with especially being able to, because he plays the 5'11". He's physical and really moves up and down the floor well for a guy his size. I mean, he's not just a guy that's uncoordinated or anything like that. He's solid. He's athletic. He moves really, really well at that position and can get up and down the court. And that's allowed Eric Holman to move from that position to his more natural spot at the 4. A guy that can spot up from the outside. He can play. He can face the basket. And they've had some more success, play off the ball. And then Eric Holman's 6'10", so if you can get Eric Holman and Abdullah Dew on the floor at the same time, you've got 2 7-footers in there. So that's really made a difference. State's played really well. They're getting a little bit more healthy. Xavier Stapleton has come back. He had some more knee issues. He's back on the floor now. Lamar Peters is back from his 3-game suspension. Going to miss another game on Sunday. That'll end his suspension. All their suspensions over with and keep everybody healthy. That's good. And then E.J. Datcher, I asked Ben Howland earlier today about his practice yesterday. He did miss the last game with a bone bruise. He's missed the last couple of games with that bone bruise, but he's kind of optimistic that he might be back this weekend. They play North Georgia. North Georgia's not even a Division I school, so it's Howland kind of wanted to schedule at this time coming on, give them ease them back into basketball before they kind of get right before they get into conference play starting next month.
Well, Ole Miss is in a really important stretch right now, Logan. Could have been an opportunity to really add to the resume, but it's not started off well. They went to the Thanksgiving neutral site event and played a couple of games in Las Vegas, lost to Utah, came home and had a real important stretch here against some good teams. Lost in overtime last Tuesday to South Dakota State. Now, that's not a team that a lot of people really fear when you hear that name, but a very good team, very athletic team, a team that'll win its league, and a team that is just very familiar with postseason. They follow that up on Saturday. They have Virginia Tech coming in, another overtime loss. So they had 2 overtime losses at home last week, and now really they play the most difficult game in that stretch Saturday at 5 o'clock when they go to Middle Tennessee. And we know the success that Middle Tennessee and Coach Kermit Davis have had in recent seasons, and Ole Miss has had really a difficult time playing those guys usually about this time of year. And I don't know a whole lot about Middle's team right now, but I can tell you that they are number 12 in the RPI, And without knowing much about them, I'm sure that they will have about 2 guys who can shoot the three, 2 guys who can score off the bounce, and they may or may not be the same 2 guys. They're going to be talented and athletic and deep. So a difficult challenge for Ole Miss Saturday at 5 at Middle Tennessee State. Logan, I'm not going to be making that game, but I would if I knew that it was going to be like alumni weekend and John Pitts was going to be there in the Blue Raider costume, but I don't think that's the case. On the floor, we see Ole Miss struggling right now, trying to replace Sebastian Saiz in the middle. That's not a surprise. Thought they could do it with several players, and they had, before the season started, another knee injury to Carlos Schillens, and that was going to affect some depth for them right away. But the big question here in the middle is, will we see improvement from Dominique Olenicek, the transfer from Duke, 7-footer, and really just, he's looking like a deer in headlights right now. When he can get set on the floor and position himself around the basket, he's shown that he can be a pretty good rim protector, but he's really just not as quick as he needs to be right now. Some guys are able to get around him if they get down there that close. He's a guy who needs to get stronger in his hands. We see some balls knocked away from Dom a little bit, so they're trying to get some play there at the 5. Bruce Stevens, the junior college transfer, has been on and off. Either or both of these guys, could improve as the season goes along. But we knew this was going to be a team of guards. Guard play has been okay. It's been pretty good, and it's been from several players. But it looks like a team right now that doesn't really know who it wants to take that last shot. Last year, if Andy Kennedy could get his team in position to have the lead late in the game, DeAndre Burnett was really good in spreading the floor and getting to the free throw line and hitting free throws to keep that lead late in the game. But if the Rebels don't have the lead, as was the case against Virginia Tech, it's hard to find who's going to take that last shot or who the best option for the last shot is when you really don't have much of an option to throw it down inside on the post. And that's just really not a part of this team's game right now. You've got some guys like Burnett and Terrence Davis, Breein Tyree, who can take it to the rim, sometimes finish, maybe get fouled. But as far as throwing the ball in there late in the game, that's not something we're going to see a lot from this team. And when you don't have that, it takes away a lot of the penetrate and pitch, or throw it in and throw it out, the outside in 3-point shot. It's harder to set up that kind of shot. And the Rebels really looked out of sorts a little bit when they were trying to find that last shot to take the lead against Virginia Tech. And really, they were in a situation there at the end of regulation where they could have held the ball for the final shot and maybe won the game. But inexplicably, Terrence Davis puts up a 3-point shot with about 20 seconds on the clock. So there are a lot of things that need to go on with this team right now, a little bit of maturing, learning one another, some chemistry. But there are some things that need to take place if Ole Miss is going to position itself for a run to postseason, whether that's the NCAA or the NIT. Right now, the NCAA is looking like a long shot if they don't start winning some of these games. A win at Middle Tennessee would be a nice resume boost. Something else, though, Logan, that we see right now in terms of RPI, the SEC has 5 teams in the top 15. Texas A&M, Tennessee, both playing well. So there will be opportunities inside the conference to build that resume. But you need to start winning. You need to start thinking of your NCAA resume in November and December. And Ole Miss needs to start winning some of these games. The Ole Miss women are off to a 7-1 start. They haven't gotten to the meat of their schedule yet. That will come soon. They have a game against RPI 68 South Alabama at home Saturday at 1 o'clock. And not too long after that, they'll have a road trip to Oregon. So their schedule will shift gears a little bit as well. Folks, that's it for this edition of Double Coverage, a production of the Daily Journal. We thank you for clicking in with us today. Be sure to check out the memo, our news podcast every Wednesday and Friday, and check out Prep Rally for all your high school sports needs every Wednesday. And Logan and I will be back with you next week for another round of double coverage.